We're official. So welcome to Automation Hour. And if this is the first time you are joining us, all lines are muted. Please post your questions to the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community, and we will post the recording as well as the deck afterwards and share it out on the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community, as well as on our website, automationhour.com, and we will tweet it out and put it out on the Trailblazer community as well. All right, so here are our upcoming sessions. We have a really special session set up for you next Friday. We're very excited to have the product management team for process automation on next Friday, Shannon Hale and Jason Teller, who will be showing you Winter 20 items. So if you're not catching the admin preview that's happening right now, we're going to have them here, and you could ask them questions directly during their presentation. So that's really exciting. And also, if you have a cool automation solution that you would like to share on Automation Hour, please direct message us. We will be scheduling out 2020 shortly. And if you can't attend these live, I do recommend to still register because you'll get the link to the recording after the fact. And we can't bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io, so need to shout out to them. And here are your co-hosts, myself, Rakesh, and David, and this was from Midwest Dreamin'. And we're very excited to have Meighan back on. Meighan has presented multiple times on Automation Hour. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Meighan to take it over.
All right, thank you so much, Jen. Hello, you guys. I am Meighan Brodkey. I'm a technical architect and the manager of the architecture group at Exceed Consulting. I am also Salesforce MVP since 2008. I'm also a blogger. You can check me out on my blog at meighanrockssf.com. I'm a co-host on System.debug. I'm a Dreamforce presenter. I'm speaking at the World Tour, at Dreamin' events. You can see me at the next Dreamin' event, North Africa Dreamin' in Morocco next month, October 19th, where I'll be speaking about our favorite topic of automation and flow. I'm a big fan of Trailhead. I've got over 430 badges. I lead the Seattle Women in Tech user group. I'm a member of the community club, and I'm also one of the founders of Ohana Slack. And you can find me on Twitter, Meighan SF. This is my 4th time presenting on Automation Hour, and I am so happy to be here. Thank you guys so much, Jen, Rakesh, and David, for having me here. And I am here to talk to you all about a very fun situation that we actually ran into just this past week. Wasn't originally the topic I was going to talk about. This was so much more exciting that I decided to pick this one instead. So the situation, forgot username. So for those of you out there that may have seen me tweeting or may have read my blog, I am a huge fan of the Community Cloud. It's my specialty. It is my favorite cloud. I think it is just the best thing in the world that is out there. And so happened to spend a lot of time playing around with it and also, building a bunch of stuff in it. And one of the people that I work with, Ken San Miguel, and I were sitting around, and he had run into a situation where there's no forgot username within the Community Cloud for a component out of the box. You may have noticed that sometimes when you go to websites or when you go to communities, that is something that you can do and that you can run into as an option for you when you are resetting your password, is the option to, you can go and find out what your forgotten password is. You could also find out what your forgotten username is. And so we needed to find out, what is it that we need to find to do this? And so looking at those options, we decided, let's build a flow and do this declaratively. And all right, so what are our options to do that? And so we needed to enter an email. We needed to find out, is that user active? And if so, get their email address and then send an email to that user that says, this is what your username is. We didn't want to just display the username on the screen because that would be a security risk. Community user members in this situation would be unauthenticated. They have forgotten their username, so they are not logged in. And then also, flows are now available for guest users. You may remember that not too long ago, guest users did not have the ability to run flows. And then you also have to think about the fact that guests do have access limits. So what are some of these limits? Well, the data that they can see can only be that which the guest profile has access to. Seems kind of obvious, but you've got to think about it. What do you really want to expose to your guests? You already have limits about what you want to expose in your community. What do you want out there for the whole wide world to see? You don't want to expose confidential information. And they're not able to access the email address of a user. It's just not an option for their profile. So we looked at a few different ways to do this, and we considered a couple of different options. I'm going to go through what those options are, and then after I go through those options, I'll tell you what problems we hit with those. So first, why don't we query the user email? Well, that's what obviously saw the first screen. Well, why don't we query a contact and then do a wait and check for the user? Well, why don't we do a second query for the user email in a subflow or run that subflow in system mode? Well, what if we do a subflow with a wait? Well, what if we just do a custom lightning component? And then we just kept thinking about things. The problems we ran into was first to query the user email. As I said, they have no access to the user email. Well, what if we query the contact and then the user email with the user in a subflow to avoid a mixed DML? Well, it seems like too much because you have to do that second query going from back and forth. They're not going to have access anyway. We don't want to expose all of our contacts in the world to the public. That's going to be a security issue. Nobody wants to show everybody everything. Well, why don't we just try to enter the information, then query the user in a subflow? Well, that just didn't work. Well, why don't we do a subflow with a wait? What if we throw a wait in that subflow and see if that works? Well, we got this beautiful message that came up every time we did that with the wait. You guys may have seen if you're on Twitter or on Slack or anywhere, this beautiful, the user interview is now waiting. It will resume in the background later. So you can't do a wait in a screen flow. It has to be in an auto launch flow, hence the second flow. Well, it'd be great if we could have that work, except this always comes up. And that message is hideous. This would be confusing to those guests, and it's just ugly. Nobody wants to have that in their production environment. And then custom lightning component. Well, yeah, I guess we could go with a custom lightning component, but if you're anything like me, you don't want to take no for an answer. When I found out that I couldn't change this wait message, I was like, okay, just because people don't think there's a way to do it doesn't mean that there's not. There's got to be some sort of workaround that I can find in some way for me to be able to figure this out and for me to find out, how can I do this? How can I work around this functionality? Plus, if we do custom lightning component, then we need to get a developer and we need to get dev hours. And do we really want to get a dev to do a POC for something that we may or may not do? A light bulb. And I've got to say, props to Kenton here. I had mentioned events, but Kenton took and he ran with that, and he was like, platform events. I'm going to take a look at that. And if it wasn't for him, never would have figured this one out. So, moving forward, what we ended up doing was going with a flow that creates a platform event. And then after that, it goes and it does an action to a navigate to URL. Yeah, easily could have put another screen in here to say, check your email, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that you want. You can make this as fancy or as low tech as you want it to be. You could even get rid of the navigate to URL. But being redirected back to the login page is pretty handy, since that's where they're going to need to go. After that, you have a process builder. This process builder is based on the platform event and the user. And the platform event email, and the email is a field on the platform event. When it matches the user email, it's going to launch a flow. And this flow just sends an email alert. And the reason why we have to launch a flow is because processes with platform events can't use a lot of those out-of-the-box pieces of functionality. For example, you can't have a next action, et cetera, et cetera. You can't do an email alert. And then our platform event is just a single email field. So to give you the actual visual of all of this stuff, this is our first flow. You just have a screen element here. Lightning speed. And this screen element has an email field, or an email component. And you'll see here, one thing to keep, let's me click on it, there we go. One thing you'll need to do here is you'll need to put a variable in. You have to check this advanced box and put in a value and put in some sort of variable here to hold the output. You'll notice that I also went through and on my actual screen itself, I got rid of the previous and pause buttons. One thing I'm a big fan of doing is making sure that I clean up the buttons on my screen flows so that they're not confusing to users when they're on there. If they aren't, just because I had pauses turned on my org, doesn't mean I want people to be able to pause every one of my flows that exist. I also got rid of the header because I'm not a big fan of having the header show in community flows. That way I'm able to use any rich text components within the community itself. Then I go through and I have a create record. I'm creating an email object. This object is not a custom object. This is a platform event. We'll take a look at that object next. I have one field on my platform event, and that is email address. And I'm just copying from those advanced variables that value from the output of user email into the email address. And then over here in the action, I'm doing a toast. I'm a big fan of the toast. I like it It's always nice to have a little pop-up. And then you also have the navigate to URL, load web page core action. This is from the unofficial Flow site. Bunch of fabulous lightning components there for flows, both screen components as well as actions. And this is one of the actions. And what it does is it lets you go to a URL after you finish your flow. And so this one, you have an input of the community URL, and then that's all there is to that first flow. This is the platform event. You'll notice that it's called email, just like it was in the flow. I have my all caps email address because I had caps lock on. No reason for it to be all caps though. It happened when I was typing in plural, my bad. But you'll notice that different from a custom object, instead of __C, you have __E. And then here you have custom fields and relationships, where you can add fields just like you do on a custom object. And so if we actually go over and say, what is a platform event? You know, they're very similar to custom objects and how they're created and the way that they look in Salesforce. They sound kind of scary because they're new and they're different. They're not something that admins are often working with, you know, straight out of the box as your very first day. But you'll notice if you just click that new button, you create a label and a plural label. It's got that same vowel checkbox. We have the option to publish immediately or after commit. And this is just when things happen. How do you want it to happen and when? So what it's doing is it's listening for when something happens and listening for that message. And kind of think about it as if you're subscribed to something and you're just sitting there and waiting around for it. And when do you want it to happen? And you're just waiting for it to happen. Very similar to an event. When does it happen? And then you have the option to subscribe. And then a couple of things to watch out for though. Has to be the last item in a process builder. When you build a process and you're using regular you're working with things, if you have a platform event, you can't do the next. If you have your process builder and you are using the platform event, you know how you can say go to the next action? If your platform event is being used, you can't go to the next action. It's just got to be a stop. You also can't use fields from that object, for example, in your email. You also can't use out-of-the-box functionality in your process builders, like email alerts within to straighten your process. You're going to have to launch a flow to do that send. So if we jump back over and look at the process builder that is fired, you'll see here that this is a platform event based on my email platform event. The object that is connected to is the user object, because what I'm doing is I'm taking that email platform event that's being created in my flow, and I want to match that email that is in the email field to the email on the user. And I'm saying when the email equals the email address, then fire this. And I want to say when it is active, we only want active users, because sometimes in a community, when you have a contact, you can make that contact a community user, and then let's say you deactivate them. What's going to happen is their email address will stay the same, but their username is going to get an underscore in the front of it, and then their user will get deactivated. If you go back and you go and activate that contact again as a user, it's going to make a new user. The problem is it's not going to, it's making that new user. It's going to use the same email address, It doesn't have to change the username because that first username got an underscore in the front. So we don't want to be telling them their username is the one with the underscore if by chance they were previously deactivated. So let's find that active contact, and then we're going to launch a flow. You'll notice here that I'm just grabbing the user ID. I'm not grabbing nothing else fancy. And the reason why is because I just want to do an email alert in my flow to that user. Jumping forward to a couple of gotchas, no standard actions, and then you can't assign acts. One other thing to think about is you don't assign access when you create platform events. So you need to go back and check the checkboxes on the profiles. You know how when you create an object, your profiles come up? It's not happening with a platform event. What ends up happening is it's just done. So when I was doing my first testing, I went through and my guest user kept getting an error when trying to create. So was everybody else. Reason why is because nobody got access. If platform events are similar to object creation, but they have a few nuances. One of them being you don't get to pick the profiles that have access. So when this flow is launched, it just goes to the second flow where it sends an email alert. This is just a standard email alert action. All I'm doing is passing over the user ID, and that's it. And then it sends an email. And to see this all in action, you'll notice that I have my community here and lies in incognito. And you'll notice that this looks very similar to right above where we have forgot password. This link here is just the rich text component. This is entirely declarative. There's no code being used to create this piece of to create any of this, but not even to create the links. It's going to take me to my forgot username page. Make sure that you set this page to be public versus a page that is, if your community is private, your pages are going to default to private. So you'll need to set this page to have public access. So I go in, I type in my email address.
Hey, Meighan.
Yes. Oh, and you can't see my screen. I didn't switch
the community.
Yeah, let me switch my screen. Hold on, my bad. But I'll do it again for you. It'll be fine. We can enter it as many times as we want to. Can you see it now? Nope, hold on. Let me do pause and then switch. Now can you see the community?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So So as I was saying, the community page, this is the link that looks very similar to forgot password. Incognito. All right. Quarter. This is where I was saying I was incognito. This is the link that I was talking about that looks the exact same as the component. Click on the link. You get to type in email address. And what's great is they can do this as many times as they need to, either in the demo or in real life. You hit next, you see your little pop-up. And then the fabulous part is it's going to redirect them over. And notice my other tabs already say login. And now it's going to take a second. See my URL already changed. There we go. And we're redirected back. And I am going to click on my email here just because I switched tabs and that was kind of a pain. So let's do it this way. And I will show you that I have, all right. Fabulous. Everybody knows my backup information now. Good to go. So you'll see that I have okay, let's see. I now have my Your Dream in 19 guest site user that's received my username. or my email address. And I didn't put my username in the message, but I would have if I would have properly planned this email properly and not reused my forgot email address, email and cloned it. But yes, this would have my username in it. And you can see here that it sent the information over. So yeah, we can also go through and have a much prettier org we can go to with jump in and go. 1 second here. This is why you should never use the orgs you're messing with. Let's get the right email on there really quick for you, since we actually have extra time. So how's everybody doing? Everybody having a great day? I'm going to say yes, fabulous. I'm just grabbing this one and let me do any questions about platform, about the flow so far?
Currently, I do not see any questions.
Perfect. All right. Okay, and let's see. Do another fabulous example. Oh, this one went into incognito. Let me log out.
Right, we do have a question now.
Yeah,
How did
awesome.
you get, okay, how did you get the forget username link on the login screen?
Yeah, so that is just our rich text component. All I did was, I can actually, let's log in to the community and I will show you that. And that is summer 17. There you go. Communities. Oh, communities. Builder. So at first I created the forgot username page, which has the flow component on it. And I made that page with page access public. Then on the login page, I just added the rich content editor. And you'll notice when I click on here, let's say click, there we go. And highlight, it just has a hyperlink. It goes straight to that page's URL. And so that is what lets me open up that page with that page being public and using that rich text component or rich content editor. Does that make sense?
Yes, Evan says very cool.
One thing that I had seen out there, this past week was actually a discussion about switching an org's automation over to using all platform events as a way to launch things. And one thing that I caution against is just to, the fact that yes, platform events are handy, but one of the downsides is the fact that you don't get to go to that next action. And the fact that you can't use that out of the box functionality for things like email alerts and using the variables that are within that are being passed within the actions themselves for some of the out of the box functionality, and having to use a flow to use some of those. So although platform events are great and do have advantages, process builders and flows are also fantastic as well. But platform events can help you solve some problems that flows and process builders can't. So just one of those things where everything does have its place. So any other questions? One other thing when assigning access to profiles within the community, to assign access to a guest profile, your guest profile is not accessible within profiles here. You actually have to access it within the community builder. So just to keep that in mind. And then also the fact that platform events, again, they're similar to objects with how they look within Salesforce, even though their functionality is different and the way that they operate is different, but also the fact that they are actually found down at the bottom, down here. And so making sure that you give the read and create access to that guest user. It's one of our problems in the beginning that gave us few errors, was not having that access.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Sorry if I probably missed this in the beginning. Why can't we use the get element on the user object after the initial screen element to find the user ID and then send the same email alert? Can't we assign read access to the guest profile for the user object and do it?
Nope, users can't have access, or guests can't have access to the user object.
Okay.
The only things that they can have access to are the items that they would have possession of, or items that you make public.
All right, another question. Did you have to build in any error screens, such as user not found?
Yeah, so to build this out properly, you have the option of either, I've seen this on other websites as well, where you can build out the, screen where it says you can give an error message that says you do not have access. Or a lot of websites just have it where they let you know that you will receive an email if you have access to that community, or if your username is, or if your email address is tied to that community. But yes, in a full build versus a POC, that is definitely what you should do, is have something, either a catch-in line, something to either let the user know or to warn them. In my case, it's just whether or not that they're active. Otherwise, the process builder lets it go. But definitely better wording, or having something that, tells them that they do not have access and sending a notification to them.
All right.
One thing to keep in mind, though, it's really quick to follow up on that, is because of the fact that it's going to have to be in the process builder and not in the flow itself, you're not going to be able to connect it to that first screen flow. So sending a notification to them to say that they do not have access is something to consider, or going with a custom component. Otherwise, just saying that they would receive an email if they have access.
All right, if anyone else has any questions, you can post it out on the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community, or on this questions function here. It also could be just a general process automation question, doesn't need to be tied to Meighan's presentation. So we'll give folks a couple minutes. Samantha said, I just checked the guest profile, and yes, I don't see an option to edit the user object. Pretty cool workaround using platform events. Thank you very much. I learned something new. Woohoo.
Very nice. Yeah, the user object's not an easy one to work with. It can be kind of tricky, especially with guests.
Okay, let's give folks another minute or so. So while we wait, what type of resources would you recommend if they want to learn more about communities, platform events, or the login flows, things that you created?
Yeah. So when it comes to login flows, there's actually a great resource on the developer community that has a few examples in an install package. I can get the link to post on the Automation Hour group for that as well. It's a fantastic option. I've also done a blog post on them as well, just going through them. And they're super, super fun. Login flows are one of my favorites. I like to use them for accepting terms of service when logging into a community. And, also for putting up maintenance when doing deployments. So they're a lot of fun, and they have a lot of really handy uses. Platform events. And also login flows are, even though the resources on the developer side, there's also one on the help site. And it's not just for developers just because it's on developer.salesforce.com. Platform events. There have been a few really good resources out there. I really like the Unofficial Flow site for some of the resources that they have put together with platform events. They have had some great tips and tricks, great information about gotchas, as well as using them with next best actions, with flows, and with process builders. Also, the platform event guide has some great examples on how to use them with processes, how to use them with flows, and how to use them with processes and flows together. As well as there are a couple of great posts out there, again, related to the Unofficial Flow site. And then in terms of communities, there are so many amazing resources out there. And, it's one of those where it's all about figuring out where they are, though. Getting hands-on and digging into communities and actually spending time in your dev org. Play with the components, get to know your templates, get to know your themes. One thing I always end up doing is people can usually tell, how all based on the fact that I always compare templates, themes, and components to winning, because it tells you when I came up on a computer. But lots of fun stuff that's out there, and just figuring out how all those pieces work together. And, what does a theme do versus a template? And I think some of the best ways to learn that isn't from reading, is actually from just getting in there and seeing it and doing it yourself. There are tons of apps and components on the App Exchange that are out there for communities. Throw on the filter on the App Exchange and install them in your dev org and just start playing with them. Definitely take a look at the community guide. I've got a handful of posts about CMS Connect and native CMS and communities on my blog, as well as there are a handful of other resources out there from others that have written blogs as well. I can help get a list together for the AutomationHour chatter group and put that out there. But I would say hands-on is going to be the best way to get to know communities. And then once you spend some time playing with them, then start reading more. And a lot of what you read is going to make more sense once you try doing it a bit. Because for me, at least, as much as I read it, I could say it and I could, repeat it, but I didn't know what a lot of it meant until I did it. And for me, that was just a huge part of it. I'm a very hands-on learner, and I like to be in there actually doing things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we do have a question from Jenna, and it's any suggestions of resources for someone who is new to automation process?
I would check out Rakesh's blog. Absolutely. Jen, what are your thoughts there?
And for me, and this was pre-Trailhead, but I definitely would say Trailhead first to get the concepts. For me, because it was before Trailhead, I did use Rakesh's Automation Champion, as well as Brian Kwong's Wizard News. For me, I had to find use cases that I could relate to. And then, like you with communities, I had to do it in Salesforce, not just read about it. It's the act of doing and then understanding how to build things is what sticks in my head and gets me to understand how it all works.
Yeah, I would say that I have probably gone in there and built it at least a quarter of the stuff that is in Rakesh's blog and my dev org. Yeah, just because of the fact that I needed to get in there and do it. And he wrote some really great descriptions on how. And I would try to relate it to something at work or a use case that I had, and then try to build it out. So yeah, and Trailhead, yeah, absolutely. And then try to come up with more scenarios, and then I always try to build upon the ones that I have and try to add a little bit more. Pay attention to the best practices. Get to know what is a null check, how to make sure you have the variables you need before you actually go to assign them, so that you don't end up getting errors. Learn about what is it that I should be doing so that I can build this right from the beginning, so that you don't pick up bad habits from the start.
So I also recommend, I know Megan's mentioned it a couple of times already, is the unofficial SF site, unofficialsf.com, I think, is the address. And that's a site that's maintained by the Salesforce product management team, but it includes links to all sorts of resources as well as blog posts and things like that.
I know that lightningflow.net still directs you there, so let's go to that and we'll find out what it is. Unofficialsf.com. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, another question we have, not directly related, but I wanted to ask if there are any gotchas or best practices for below scenario. I am building a flow for a sample public survey to be sent to our contacts and capture responses using custom objects. I am planning to put it on a customer community page, provide guest profile access to the new custom objects created for survey Q&A. This is a new community and we do not have any community licenses. Other than page limits, anything else to worry about?
So make sure that you give them access to create for whatever the custom object or custom objects involved are. Since it is, you're not going to be able to automatically tie it to the contact unless you give access to guests to see all of your contacts. That's something that you're going to have to either look at doing manually or do something similar to this. This flow with the user with some sort of back-end lookup, unless you want to expose all of your contact data. But also making sure you're watching out for your field level security, give them access to everything that you need. Make sure that that page is public for the page you're exposing. And then are you using Salesforce surveys or are you using global action or a flow? Because keeping that in mind, if you use a global action is for a single object. If you use a flow, just keep in mind, how many records you have to create, do your DML at the end.
So it's a screen component in flow is the answer.
Okay. So yeah, make sure you do a lot of testing, and you shouldn't have to worry about licenses as long as nobody is logging in. Just watch out for your page views. And if it is unauthenticated, they'll just be able to do the survey once. They won't be able to go back and log back in unless you use some sort of custom code and a token for any sort of like go backsies type of situation. So as long as it's just a one-time deal for them to fill it out and they don't have to go back to complete it, they should be fine. If they have any attachments, just make sure that you're doing your document component after the record create. Any tips from you in terms of the flow side? I mean, on the community side, it's pretty straightforward. If it's unauthenticated, make your page public and don't go over your page views.
I think you covered it. Right, let's see, anybody else have questions? So while we wait on that, I know in your intro slide, you mentioned the Salesforce Ohana on Slack. Can you give more information on if people are interested in joining that? How can they join? What is it?
Absolutely. So Ohana Slack is a Slack space that I started a couple of years ago with one of my coworkers, and I am going to do Slack. Can you guys see my Slack?
Yes.
So this is one of the fabulous things that's out there to check out Slack and what is available. Lots of fun. Great place to connect with people, get help on different Salesforce topics. We have everything from the community cloud to even a great channel for process builders workflow rules. Great time for people to connect, ask questions, 24/7 real-time help. Lots of people in here that are admins, new admins, experienced admins, consultants, developers, architects, MVPs from all around the world that are out there just trying to help each other out and connect with each other. It's not a space for selling, so you don't have to worry about that. It's all people that are out there for each other, so it's not a spammy place, which is really nice, and it's a lot of fun. We've definitely grown. We're over 2,000 people now, and it's a lot of fun. We're going to be getting together at Dreamforce. More details to come, but we'll be having an ice cream meetup. I'm a big fan of ice cream. So yes, we'll be having ice cream and having a nice little Dreamforce get together. And so if you feel like joining, I'll drop the link in the chat, as well as in the well, I'll drop it in the Automation Hour group. How about that? Let's go with that.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay, I don't think there are any other questions. So rather than hold you up anymore, Meighan, thank you again for coming back and presenting. Come back as many times as you want.
Thank all of you. This has been awesome. And thank all of you for attending.
Yeah, great. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.
Thank you and have a great weekend.
Bye.